Hello, welcome back to everyone that's tuned into our channel, American Ultra Stock. Here we are again, it's our midweek upload. We're going to be reviewing the MLS. If you're new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe. I'm pretty sure at some point we would have made at least one type of video that you could enjoy. But this is the video where we recap what we saw during the weekend. Another MLS match week number 2. 14 games, 36 goals, and 63 yellow cards. Pretty crazy stat right there. But straight off the bat, Braden, the first game was Minnesota. After they won against Austin, they were hosting the Crew. And what did you think about that tie?
So to start out with the first half, I thought Minnesota looked pretty good, honestly, at home. Their home opener, they were really hungry, and they threatened the Crew a lot in the first half. It was a pretty open game. Both teams had a lot of chances, but I think Minnesota were very unlucky to not be leading at the half. I think that may have cost them ultimately potential 3 points. I think Sang-Bin Jeong and Kaden Clark in particular on the wings look very exciting, especially the 21-year-old Korean on the right wing. He was constantly creating chances, embarrassing Crew defenders. I think he's going to be one to watch for now and the future. Timu Puki was off to a slow start for Minnesota. He probably should have scored. He had a chance through on goal, but the keeper did ultimately save it. He probably should have done better. But honestly, if he does get back to his form from last season and the form we all know from him at Norwich, I think this team could be pretty scary on the attack with all the weapons they have. And the last thing from Minnesota's perspective, Tani Oluwaseyi, I probably butchered his name, but the former San Antonio FC striker who had 25 goal contributions last year in the championship, comes into Minnesota this season and instantly makes an impact with a late goal to equalize the game and send the crowd absolutely crazy to pick up their point at home. And yeah, I thought it was a pretty good showing from Minnesota. As for the Crew, I think Wilfried Nancy showed why he's one of the best coaches in MLS. The Crew came out so much better in the second half after his team talk, and ultimately probably should have won the game after controlling the second half. And as well on the pitch, Cucho Hernandez proved why he's one of the best players in the league as well. He was doing it himself for most of the game and scored a beautiful goal as well, their only goal of the match.
Yeah, definitely a star there. Moving on to the next match, where the star of the show wasn't a player, it was just the weather, really. I'm pretty sure it's not how Hugo Lloris envisioned his debut. Well, not his debut, but what he thought when he was coming to MLS. He had to go all the way to Salt Lake. They were hosting LAFC and ultimately won 3-0. Your main takeaways on this one, Braden?
This was a crazy game, and it started before kickoff because it was postponed 2 hours due to weather concerns. They finally kicked off. 4 minutes in, they have to stop because of lightning. Then they just come out and play in an absolute blizzard. No one knows what's going on. Is it really football? I don't know. But it was the most entertaining game to watch for me. I wish every game, or at least one game per match day, was like that, because it's just really, really fun to watch, especially that celebration from Chicho Arango making snow angels. I thought he was pretty good. Andres Gomez was excellent on the right-hand side. I thought he had his way with Mexican defender Omar Campos from LAFC, who clearly has not seen snow in his life, and it showed. Being from Mexico, I mean, you can't really blame the guy. But, I mean, he was very good in their Week 1 game against the Sounders, but he was out of his depth here, got dusted basically every time. You could argue he was at fault for all 3 of the RSL goals, and obviously there was some other things to consider as well. But Diego Luna, I think, is well the final player who deserves a mention for RSL. Excellent assist control. I think a lot of players in that situation would have shot, but he knew the conditions perfectly. Great layoff to Andres Gomez, who just finished the game basically already there. And RSL were very good. LAFC couldn't get anything going. They had a couple of chances. Denny Bouanga, I think, and I don't remember who the other one was, but dribbling through a couple of players, but really nothing threatening for LAFC. RSL were clearly more ready for the conditions than LAFC, which showed in Steve Cherundolo's post-match interview, where he basically whined like a little baby about the conditions, even though the RSL had to play in the same thing. So fully deserved loss for LAFC, and we hope it keeps coming.
Yeah, he definitely is one to always give a reason for the losses. But moving on to the next match, the blockbuster, the game, Inter Miami against Orlando. And I have to say, I was a little bit shocked. I know it's a smaller stadium, but it wasn't even in the top 5 best attendances in the match weeks, which is a little bit surprising. But the game in itself, I mean, speechless in my opinion. That one let a lot of people who thought it could be an entertaining rivalry affair. 5-0 to Inter Miami. Was deserved, Braden? What did you think?
I think in Inter Miami fans' defense, I think you more have to look at the attendance percentage, because the stadium sizes vary so much. You have the huge NFL stadiums that fit 60, 70,000 people, and then you have the smaller soccer-specific ones that are like 20K or even less. But regardless, yeah, this Orlando team came out horrible. I think they were shell-shocked, and honestly, it was a very quick start for Inter Miami, and I think that might have been what ultimately led to the Orlando collapse. In the 4th minute, Suarez scoring, and then in the 11th minute, getting his brace. I think this is a completely different Orlando team from the one that went toe-to-toe and really gave Inter Miami a lot of problems in Leagues Cup last year. We're probably the only team during that run to fully get under Inter Miami's skin. Maybe should have even won that game. They had an argument for. But from Inter Miami's perspective, I criticized Luis Suarez and Julian Gressel on the last version of this. And I'd have to hold my hands up and apologize, because both of them were absolutely sensational. Gressel with 2 assists, it should have been 3, but Suarez decided to be unselfish for the 3rd one, even though he probably could have got a hat trick just slaying it off for Robert Taylor. Suarez with 2 goals and 2 assists in the game as well, and looking like what he was last season, the best player in the Brasileirão. I will still stand by my take that Tata Martino isn't a good manager. I think he got carried by the players. But I will say, in his defense, the tactics adjustments that he made were elite. Having Busquets sit back between the center backs and not get involved in the attack really helped him out a lot, because against Galaxy last week in particular, Paintsil was running circles around him, same for Ricky Puig. I think being able to sit back really helped him not get basically dominated in the midfield. And then having Gressel and Diego Gomez going up and attacking, Gomez kind of the workhorse, winning the ball back a lot, as well as obviously Taylor, Suarez, Messi, worked to absolute perfection for them. And then one little thing as well for Tata, Noah Allen is not a center back. Please stop playing him there. Not only is he too small for the position, it's just he doesn't feel comfortable there. He should be playing left back. I know they have Jordi Alba, but stop playing him out of position. It's not good for young players. And the last thing from Inter Miami's perspective, I would argue that they're borderline unbeatable in this league when they have a full week to prepare. And there's not going to be a lot of occasions where they do have that, because of all the competitions they're in, especially CONCACAF Champions Cup starting off for them this week. But when they do have the full week to prepare, they're going to be very scary. And then from an Orlando perspective, they really need to sort a lot out, because their first game against Montreal was the worst one probably in MLS so far, boring 0-0 draw, and then another 0-goal performance from them. There's a lot that they need to take care of before the season gets too far in.
Yeah, definitely need a lot of adjustments there. And you also forgot to mention Messi scored the best goal of his career in that match. That was unbelievable. Moving on to the next one. You mentioned a boring draw. Well, this one wasn't 0-0, but Vancouver hosted Charlotte, and it was a 1-1 game. Any main takeaways, anything notable in this one?
Have to shout out Syracuse legend Ryan Raposo, scoring excellent goal where he definitely didn't hit the ball and almost caused a save. Shout out to him for scoring and then hitting all of the celebrations. Got to make the most of it. Like he said, he doesn't really score too much, so he had to capitalize on that opportunity. I thought for the Whitecaps, the fact that it was their first game of the season, I thought they were pretty solid, especially considering that Charlotte already played a game last week. And the fact that Dean Smith has this team looking so solid. He's, like I said it last week, I'll say it again, he's already proving that he's way too good for MLS level and management. I don't actually think they have a lot of talent. I think they're in the bottom third at least for talent, maybe even lower. But just the system they're playing, it works. He clearly believes in the players believe in him. And honestly, for Vancouver, even though it was a home game, I thought it was a good result for them to take a point away from this game. Pedro Vite was the main star for me. I think he's going to be one of the best center mids in the league this year, the Ecuadorian international. And then another thing I'll say, the last thing for Charlotte, Enzo Capetti looked a lot better. Brilliant dummy from him to set up Yuri Tavares to open the scoring for Charlotte. And I think he'll finally make his breakthrough pretty soon, sooner rather than later, after a pretty disappointing first season in MLS. But he's fully adjusted now, better manager. I think he'll have a pretty good season.
Yeah, and those are really good takes. And again, guys, if the video is a little bit extensive, tell me another place on YouTube that you can get this type of analysis. I've been up right here, my co-host, Braden. Moving on to the next one, Chicago Fire. The Fire was hosting Cincinnati. We know that Cincy is such a good team. They had a little bit of a change. I felt like they were more adjusted, definitely getting into the groove, and they won away. And the Fire, I mean, it's been a little bit of hard times for them. What did you think, Braden? Do you think their season will be ultimately doomed?
I think there's some bright spots you can look at. Even a game in a game that Brian Gutierrez, their young star, was pretty quiet. I think for his standards, he still did draw the penalty that led to their only goal, Xherdan Shaqiri slotting at home. So that's just a positive to take away. Chris Brady made a lot of saves, ultimately losing, but it's basically the same thing as Gaga Slonina, the other former Fire keeper. His defense is letting him down. And I think, honestly, this defense could be a huge problem for Chicago. Conceding 2 in match day 1 against the Union, now conceding 2 again to FC Cincinnati, only 1 point from their first 2 games because of that. And honestly, I think their attack has looked pretty solid so far through the season, except for, I will say, their big money striker, Hugo Kuipers, coming in from Belgium. 0 shots for him this game. In his home debut, I think that's a little bit concerning. Obviously, I think he'll still get back on track this season. It's still early, but for a player who costs that much money, you expect him to integrate seamlessly to the league, and he hasn't seemed to do that yet. But him and Gutierrez, once they're clicking, I think could be a pretty good attack. Miles Robinson, shout out to him for scoring his first MLS goal and all but securing a USMNT call-up. Whether it's deserved, I don't know about that, but congrats to him. Luciano Acosta is still creating so many chances for Cincinnati and picking up assists off the corner to Miles Robinson, like I mentioned, despite, honestly, I think he's not looking as effective as he did in his MVP season last year. I think he's losing the ball a lot more, and maybe the physicality has caught up to him. His obviously being 5'3" is not an advantage in soccer in any way, shape, or form. And then the last thing, I'd like to see more of 19-year-old Gerardo Valenzuela, because he had a man-of-the-match performance, goal and assist in CONCACAF Champions Cup midweek. And I think if he gets more MLS chances, I think he could really shine, especially with an amazing team around him for Cincy.
Yeah, they do have an amazing team. Talking about amazing teams and players getting called up, great players that Greg loves. Dallas, they're missing the Pirate of the Caribbean, who also seems to be going live on Twitch every single day now. That's a topic for another time or not. But the Dallas were ultimately hosting Montreal, and they lost 2-1 at home. And you mentioned that Montreal was in the most boring match, in my opinion, as well, in the first week. And this time around, they did win, get an away win. Main takeaways on that one.
Yeah, Ferreira did make his season debut off the bench, 61st minute, but I think it was a little too late. But positives for Dallas, Peter Musa has arrived. He scored on his debut, didn't play match day 1, and they still picked up a win without him. And I think when they're all fully healthy, an attack of Musa, Ferreira, Bernard Kamungo, Dante Sealy, and Paul Arriola is going to be very, very exciting to watch. And especially if you add in Alan Velasco, who does have a long-term injury, but he'll be back in the summer, late summer. And I think once all of those players are fit and firing, it's going to be one of the best attacks in the league, especially to watch. On the negative side, starting 35-year-old former USMNT center back Armor Gonzalez in 2024 is not the move at all. And it clearly showed. Montreal were able to exploit him a lot of the game. And I think ultimately he was one of the main reasons why they did concede 2 goals. So they probably need to work on that. Surprise, surprise, MLS team needs to work on their defending. Tell me where we've seen this before. For Montreal, are they actually good? I really didn't rate this team heading into the season, but picks up a point against an Orlando team on the road that we thought was going to be good after seeing the Inter Miami game. Maybe we need to reconsider our expectations for them. But then picking up an away win as well against Dallas, who are also a pretty solid team, I think, in MLS. It's good. It's a good sign for Montreal, and I think all the credit should go to their new head coach, Laurent Courtois, coming in from Columbus Crew's MLS Next Pro team, where he did win, I believe, back-to-back championships in the first 2 years of MLS Next Pro, just showing that he's such a good coach. And honestly, I think all of the new coaches hired have been pretty good so far in this league. And the final thing, it sucks to see their striker, former LAFC striker, Mahala Opoku, going down injured, but honestly, a rotation of Matthias Kokoro, who they signed in January, Josef Martinez, who they also brought in, who scored his first Montreal goal, and 21-year-old Jules Anthony Vilsaint, who came off the bench and also scored. I think it's going to be a really, really exciting attack for Montreal this season.
Yeah, and moving on from a 2-1 away win to another one. This time, Houston, also all these Texas teams playing at home. We had last week Austin losing as well, but now we had Houston losing at home to New York Red Bull, who I thought had a really good match last week, but things didn't really go as planned for them. This time around, they did get the 3 points on the board. And what did you think of that one?
The only thing I can say really for Houston from this game is that Coco Carrasquilla is way too good for this level. Beautiful, beautiful assists, a long ball to Ibrahim Aliou, who did well to control it and ultimately finish to give Houston a perfect start to the game. It's just a shame that they couldn't hold on to that. But I'm honestly not taking too much consideration to Houston's games because they do have Hector Herrera, Nelson Quinones, and Sebas Pereira all injured. And also they're dealing with a lot of rotation problems because they are still in CONCACAF Championship Cup. Luckily for them, they'll probably be out soon because they play the Crew this round, so they can hopefully stop rotating so much. But once they're back to full strength, I'll take this games into consideration more. They were a very good team last year. I expect them to be more of the same. As for the Red Bulls, like you said, I thought they looked really good. Emil Forsberg and Noah Eiley, the new Swedish duo that they have, looked like excellent signings. Already two of their best players. Eiley bringing a much-needed presence to the back line, and Forsberg, everything in the attack goes through him for New York Red Bulls. And honestly, the whole starting lineup in general is really, really good. And all the youth options they have off the bench, both healthy and injured, a couple in MLS Next Pro right now as well, are very, very exciting. So I think down the line, mid-season in that slog, when the competitions start to ramp up, you've got obviously Leagues Cup and a bunch of games for, I think their MLS Next Pro side will be in the Open Cup. So the fixture congestion could lead to some more opportunities for these players. I think this team's going to be very fun to watch this season. And then Daniel Edelman and Frankie Amaya, mentioning those young players, the former U20 captain for the U.S., Daniel Edelman, looks really, really good alongside his partner Amaya. And honestly, if he keeps up this form, he could be off to Europe soon.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. I thought that his growth from last summer to how he's playing right now, it's nice that he's going to be getting consistent game time, especially for a defensive midfielder. We don't really produce many of these. Well, we have great depth and the main team, but we don't really produce them in MLS. It's nice to see that. Now, moving on, you said that it's going to be nice to watch and great to watch. I'm pretty sure you would like to watch all of these games. You are the fan of Philly Union. They did tie against Sporting Kansas City, who I thought were kind of poor in the first week, but main takeaways on this one as a fan?
Yeah, the main takeaway immediately that stood out to me, 22-year-old right back for Sporting Kansas City, Jake Davis, was so good in this game. He was personally my man of the match. I don't think he ended up getting that award, but for me, I think he was the best player. He was absolutely everywhere, just creating or blocking chances for the Union and winning the ball back for Sporting Kansas City. He looks really promising, and honestly, I think one day he could become one of the best defenders in this league. What a goal from Remy Voltaire, the Frenchman. No keeper saving that. Just an absolute beautiful effort off the post and in once it fell to him advantageously, but he did well in that situation. Another thing for Sporting Kansas City, their striker, their star man, Alan Pulido, has been very ineffective in the first few games of the season, but similar to what I said for Pookie earlier, if he can get back to last year's form, I think this team could surprise a lot of people this year. On paper, they don't seem like they have the best roster, but they're scrappy and they can cause a lot of problems, especially with Daniel Szeloy, the Hungarian. He was doing everything for them. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the league. And then moving on to the Union side, I have to say an apology to all Sporting Kansas City fans because we absolutely scammed them. The ball did go out of bounds, but we still awarded a throw-in. It's just an issue that we're going to see a lot with the replacement referees. MLS needs to sort out their bargaining ASAP because the refs have been a problem, a huge talking point already, just 2 games into the season for most teams. But Alejandro Bedoya showing why the entire team campaigned for him to come back after it looked like maybe the front office wanted to move on from him, coming off the bench and showing just why he's probably the best player in club history, scoring a late equalizer to rob a point from Sporting Kansas City. I can't really take this game into consideration from a Union perspective because, like I mentioned with Dynamo, there's a lot of injuries. Andre Blake just recently came back, but he wasn't in this game. Carranza, the star striker, is injured. Jose Martinez had to come off early because he picked up a knock. Leon Flock's out for a while. And the same thing as the Dynamo. Lots of rotation for CCC. We played against Pachuca. As we're recording this tonight, picked up a draw. That was for the main focus. It's going to be the main focus as long as we're in the competition. So until the CONCACAF Champions Cup ends, I think this is going to be a story for a lot of the best teams in the league. You can't really take their games into that much of consideration.
Yeah, that is true. And moving on to a team that was one of the best in the league, especially considering how young they are. St. Louis, they were hosting it in New York City. Let's be honest, they lose all the time these days. And St. Louis did win. They imposed their will, 2-0 win at home. What did you think?
There were bigger scorelines, especially the Miami game, but I thought this was maybe outside of the Miami one, probably the most straightforward win of the week. It was all St. Louis, nothing for NYCFC. Their young attack, like I mentioned last week, is still yet to gel. I think it's going to take them a lot of time this season. This is kind of a transition year. They have a lot of new players. I'd love to see their 18-year-old Serbian wonder kid Jovan Mijatovic start next game over Monsef Bakar, who has provided nothing up top, and 19-year-old Argentine wonder kid as well, Agustino Ojeda. I think it's time to bring him into the starting lineup alongside Jovan and see what the young guys can do, because they splashed out a lot of money on that pair. I think it was around 15 million combined fee for the two of them. So I think it'd be nice to see them finally get a starting spot, since the current attackers aren't really providing anything. Christian McFarland as well. I'd like to see him make his MLS debut. 17-year-old English youth international, also eligible for the U.S. Finally made the bench for them. He should be the backup left back for them heading into the season, and with some struggles, maybe he'll get a chance soon. I hope he does. James Sands getting a red card is very worrying. He's supposed to be one of the team's best players and most consistent, but honestly, the midfield of him, Keaton Parks, and Andres Pereira, which on paper looks very, very solid and was pretty good last year, has been very underwhelming, I think. And that's supposed to be the strong point of this team, and with them not performing, it's looking very bad for NYCFC. And then for St. Louis perspective, Celio Pompeo, the Brazilian, looks vastly improved compared to last year, picking up a goal and assist in this game. I think he's in for a mini breakout season. Aziel Jackson, the USMNT January call-up, has been a little disappointing, but he's been able to get away with it, mainly due to the strong form of Samuel Adeniran with 2 goals in 2 games. He's basically Daryl DK 2.0. I think he's very physical, very, very large. I think he's like around 6'5", and he's always a problem for opposing defenders. We saw his amazing physical goal last week and scoring another one this week.
Yeah, let's hope that he doesn't get that injury for him. I don't want to roast DK, but let's hope that he doesn't resemble that. Now, moving on to a team that's an international for our national team, and Rapids. Again, the Camp Cupcake squad. I'll be honest, fairly disappointed with this result, especially if you take into consideration Nashville isn't really at their best. I don't think so. And it was 1-1. The Rapids taking a little bit of time to have anything going on for them. Take it away, Braden.
Yeah, an absolute disaster for them in week 1, and not much better here. They did get their first point on the board under their new manager, Chris Armas, who, I'm not going to lie, might already need to be sacked, because being this bad with this Camp Cupcake FC team is probably a crime. They only scored due to a beautiful, beautiful header from Shaq Moore. Just a shame it went into his own net. I call him up for that. Play him at striker, maybe. It sounds like something Greg would do. But yeah, the Colorado attack needs to gel and fast. Bringing in all these new signings, I understand it should take time, but they looked so good in preseason. I really don't understand what's going wrong for them in attack. They just look absolutely toothless and aren't providing much of anything. And like you mentioned, the fact that they're only getting a draw at home against a Nashville team that's without their 2 best players, their 2 DPs, Hani Mukhtar, former MLS MVP, and Sam Surridge, who they signed last season from Nottingham Forest, is very concerning from a Colorado perspective. This should have been a pretty straightforward win, especially with Nashville also rotating for CONCACAF Champions Cup against Inter Miami coming into this week. Like I said, I can't state it enough, honestly, how disappointing it is for the Rapids. But one little bright note, Sam Vines had a great game after scoring a pretty bad own goal last week in his Rapids return. So it's nice to see for him. I'm always rooting for him. I think he's had some really, really horrible luck, especially this season. And Zach Steffen as well. He only made 1 save, but it was a pretty good one, denying Shaq Moore, who was trying to score on both ends this match. But unfortunately for him, Zach Steffen got in the way, making a brilliant save, stopping the ball from going into the top corner. And then the final takeaway, honestly, is for Nashville's perspective. They needed a 90th minute penalty to even get a point here against a very underwhelming Colorado team. They're going to get absolutely ran over by Inter Miami in CONCACAF Champions Cup, which could be a blessing in disguise. With Hani Mukhtar and Sam Surridge out, like I mentioned, I think the most important thing for them is getting back to full health. And a lot of games with a lot of injury problems is not a good sign, honestly.
Yeah, I personally don't think that Nashville will have any chance to succeed or maybe even contend for the playoffs if they do stay in that competition for too long. I think that the squad is too thin. Now moving on to a game that had a bit of everything. Portland Timbers 2-2 against DC United. Lots of goals. Apart from the Miami one is the one that comes to light the most, and also RSL. But it was a very entertaining affair over there in Portland. And what did you think of this one?
First takeaway for me has to be Maxime Crepeau, the former LAFC keeper and Canadian international. I thought he was excellent on his Timbers debut, probably getting them a point in this game, making 6 excellent saves. And another thing, I think the main takeaway for the Timbers here, it's a huge positive despite a draw at home. The stars from match day 1, Anthony, who had a brace, and Eric Williamson, who had a goal and an assist against the Rapids, were pretty quiet, but the others on this team stepped up, particularly Santiago Moreno, the Colombian winger, scoring a goal and picking up an assist in this game, which proves that this team is so well-rounded in their starting lineup. It's basically every game it's going to be someone new's night to shine. And I think that's very encouraging. One downside is that 20-year-old Pan-American striker, Tega Akoba, still hasn't played a minute, but that's just due to the unbelievable depth that they have. I think MLS Next Pro is going to be a big thing for him this season, especially after UTEP turned to break out this year. I'd really like to see him get some more minutes, especially at the MLS level, but we'll have to wait to see if that happens. For DC's perspective, honestly, great fight to come back from down 2-0 in a hostile environment. Timbers are some of the best fans in the league. So to score 2 goals unanswered and pick up a point on the road is very impressive and shouldn't be understated at all. I thought Aaron Herrera, the Guatemala international, was immense at right back, picking up his 2nd assist in as many games and keeping Anthony quiet, like I mentioned, after his brace against the Rapids. I thought he did an excellent job on both ends of the pitch there. And 18-year-old Christian Fletcher, we were so high on him and remains high on him. I think he was in both of our top 2 or top 3 for MLS prospects to break out this season. Go watch that video if you haven't. I made it a couple of weeks ago, but immediate impact off the bench, scoring the equalizer, and he actually had a big chance as well 2 minutes before that he maybe should have scored as well. He's getting into the right positions, he's capitalizing. I'd love to see him start next week, despite a lot of tough young competition for him. Jackson Hopkins as well coming off the bench, making an impact, and Ted Pietro as well is actually starting for them, the 22-year-old. And then last thing for DC's perspective, I think the double pivot that they have of the 21-year-old Finland international, Matai Peltola, and the experienced Leeds legend, Matthias Klick, they look really, really good together. I don't really rate DC's back line or goalkeeper situation in the slightest, besides Aaron Herrera, like I mentioned, at right back. But honestly, with those 2 in front of them, it might not matter because Peltola and Klick are snuffing out everything from the Portland attack. And honestly, I think they're going to be huge for DC this season.
Yeah, it was a really entertaining match, and you're right. It's so nice to see a youngster breaking through and honestly cementing himself as an option, a real option, viable option for his team. Moving on to this game that both of these teams like to pride themselves in producing some players. I personally don't think that they do. And the last one that one of them did is kind of struggling down south. But San Jose Earthquakes, they hosted Carlson Galaxy, or LA Galaxy, they like to say that. And they lost 3-1. I think that the Earthquakes are repeatedly, in my opinion, one of the most boring teams and underperforming ones, or they're just performing to their abilities. Do you agree with me, Braden?
Yeah, I'll make this one quick. From a San Jose perspective, losing the Cali Clasico, as they like to call it, this badly at home is embarrassing. And the fact that their only goal scorer, Preston Judd off the bench, was actually a member of the Galaxy last season, and they didn't deem him good enough to keep, really, really embarrassing for San Jose. The fact that your biggest rivals, rejects, are now your goal scorers. But I think the front 3 of Espinosa, Ebobisse, and Pellegrino, I think they could be all right. Obviously, I talked about Pellegrino's goal-scoring record in Norway the past 2 seasons in the first weekday recap, but they're struggling a lot, especially in this game against Galaxy. I think they're going to need a lot of time to gel and build up some chemistry together. And then from a Galaxy perspective, Joseph Paintstill, I can't praise this man enough. A goal and assist after impressing last week against Miami. He drew the pen on Busquets. I'd already say he's the best winger in MLS. Honestly, I don't know why he made the decision to come here in the first place. He's easily one of, if not the best players in the league, bar none, and really should be back in Europe. I think he will be pretty soon, a season or 2. Maybe he'll win Galaxy a trophy, go back. Who knows? And then Dejan Javoric, their striker, him being serviceable at best, I don't think he's anything special. Just a league average striker is going to get him so many goals this season. Maybe breaking his, I think 15 is his career high for a season. I think he's going to absolutely smash that out of the park. 2 goals and an assist in 2 games already. And he's the one I think that benefits most from this revamped attack with all the weapons they now have with Puig, Paintsill and Gabriel Peck as well coming off the bench, the Brazilian. I'd like to see him get a start next game because Fagundes has been pretty ineffective. And then last thing, Mickey Amane at right back looks very good. Him and Mayo Yoshida, the two Japanese players, have formed a great partnership at the back. And they're pretty old. The Galaxy backline is very old with those two and Martin Castres, but they're getting the job done for now.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be the biggest glow up from one season to another for Galaxy. I think that this Galaxy team will do absolutely excellent compared to last year, at least. Now, moving on to what some people may think was a boring match, but I thought it was a very tactical affair. A great effort by Austin FC to get a draw all the way at Seattle Sounders. Honestly, you would struggle to think that they could win a game really with their current squad. They have their best player injured, but it was a tie ultimately in the match that I will also give one emphasis right here in the ugliest jersey in the league. I think that the Seattle Sounders jersey looks absolutely horrible. Some people love it, some don't. But anyways, on the match, Braden, your main takeaways.
I think that if that game was played again 100 times, I think Seattle would score in all of those games. Honestly, I can't believe that they didn't put one in the back of the net. 23 shots, 1.24 expected goals compared to Austin's 0.04. We know what their strategy was, and they executed it brilliantly to their credit. Just bunker down, park the bus, and get away with a very, very valuable away point early in the season. Like you mentioned, I don't think this team is going to win any games without Sebastian Driussi, their best and some would argue only good player. I don't think this squad is very talented at all. But picking up a point here against one of the deepest teams in the league is really good. For a Sounders perspective, just so disappointing. Like I mentioned, they should have won this game easily, but not even that. Pedro de la Vega, the new star signing, picked up an injury. He's going to be out for a while, 6 to 8 weeks apparently, and that just adds them to their long, long list of players in the hospital. Albert Rusnak, Rodriguez, João Paulo, Nathan, Stefan Fry, Reed Baker-Whiting, and Yamar. That is basically half their starting lineup, if not more, that is out with an injury or due to personal reasons. Once they're all back, I think on the bright side, the Sounders are easily the deepest team in the league when they're fully healthy. And even with a couple injuries, I think they'll still be fine, which is big because with all the fixture congestion we have in MLS, there's going to need to be some depth, and I think a lot of teams don't necessarily have that. And then I'll give a special mention to Josh Atencio, the USMNT January call-up. I thought he was really, really good. Boston midfield, making the FOTMOB MLS Team of the Week for whatever that's worth. I think he's stolen the spotlight completely from his midfield partner, the 18-year-old Obed Vargas, who had a lot of hype, especially last season. But I think he's been pretty quiet, and Atencio has honestly been carrying him in the midfield.
Yeah, I watched this game and I thought that Vargas was underwhelming, really. But we forget how young he is, really. It's nice that he's getting good minutes and partnering with a player that is stepping up. But moving on to stepping up, this is the stepping up club because last year I thought that they were absolutely horrible, but Toronto are looking a lot nicer. They did win at the Revs, and some may say it should have been a draw, but I thought that it was a fair result. What do you think?
I think the Revs did dominate this game at home, but ultimately they didn't get the job done. They didn't capitalize on their chances. A large part thanks to Sean Johnson, who is continuing his career renaissance, his revival, with 6 saves and keeping a huge clean sheet on the road at New England, who were one of the best teams in the East last season, and pretty embarrassing loss from a Revs perspective. This team is much improved, this Toronto team, but they are still last year's wooden spoon winners, least points in the league. Losing to them at all, let alone at home, it is embarrassing. And honestly, I think I have to point a finger here. I'm not being biased, I swear. Noel Buck, the traitor, the modern-day Benedict Arnold, I don't think he's played a single good game for the Revolution since becoming a regular for England's U19s. Honestly, looking back, maybe he had 1 or 2, but I think he's been poor for the main part. And I'm also curious, I wonder what he thinks of their new pre-match tradition. As a proud Brit himself, clearly he embraces that, his culture and heritage. That new pre-match tradition of them throwing off the tee with the opponent's logo, I think it's very disrespectful to their player, who clearly is so British. I mean, one of the most English guys I've ever seen, honestly. So I think he's got some complaints about that. Maybe that's why he hasn't been playing well. He's protesting. But from a Toronto perspective, one moment of class was all they needed from their 2 star men, Federico Bernardeschi and Lorenzo Insigne. And honestly, I think this is what Toronto expected when they originally signed them a couple of years back. Just making the difference in a game where honestly they didn't have too much attacking threat, mainly due to the fact that their striker competition is horrible, regardless of who you put out there, whether it's Prince Owusu or Ayo Akinola, who looks very, very fat. Regardless of who is out there, it doesn't really matter. They're ineffective. But having Insigne and Bernadeschi really helps the attack. And another shout out, I mentioned him last week, but I have to keep mentioning him. Davy Flores, the Honduran international. He's only played 2 MLS games, and he's already my favorite CDM in the league. I think he's absolutely magnificent. He helped this team so much. They leaked goals like crazy last year, and I think he's a huge part of the fact that they are keeping clean sheets now. I believe that's 2 in a row actually for Toronto since they got a 0-0 in match day 1. He's so good in the midfield, stopping so many attacks, getting tackles, and I don't think I've seen him put a foot wrong so far in 2 games.
Yeah, and that concludes it. Match week 2 of MLS. Sorry, guys, if you didn't enjoy the video being too long, but again, we've tried our best to give the most in-depth analysis that we can, do justice to our league. Ultimately, this league is crucial. I know there's a lot of controversy going on, but it is crucial for the growth of the game in the US. So we'll be doing this segment. Leave a like, please. Comment down below the things that you enjoy or not about this segment. We'll try to tailor it to your guys' taste. And please share with your friends as well. Subscribe. We're so happy to have so many of you guys being new around here, and we'll see you next time.